In the middle of a funeral, a German shepherd leaped forward, barking wildly at the coffin. Moments later, a stranger ripped open the casket and uncovered a secret so dark it could destroy the entire village. It was a cold, gray morning in Willow Creek, a quiet village where everyone believed they knew each other's lives inside and out. Rain tapped gently against the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Church. Inside, the air felt heavy with sadness. People sat close together in wooden pews, dressed in black, whispering in hushed voices. Some wiped their eyes with handkerchiefs, while others stared ahead, their faces pale and stunned. At the front of the church rested the coffin of Charles Whitaker. To most people, Charles was a respected figure, a businessman who had always donated to local charities, sponsored village fairs, and helped neighbors in need. But as the hours of mourning stretched on, a strange undercurrent of uncertainty rippled through the gathering. Even the closest friends of Charles realized they had never truly known everything about him. Sitting near the front was Emma Whitaker, Charles's niece. She looked small and exhausted, her black coat hanging loosely over her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen from days of crying, and her gaze kept drifting to the polished wood of her uncle's casket, as if hoping to wake up from a nightmare. By her side lay Max, the German shepherd who had been Charles's loyal companion for years. Max was known all over the village for his intelligence and calm temperament. He rarely barked without reason, and most people had come to trust his instincts. For the first part of the ceremony, Max sat quietly, his head resting on Emma's foot. His breathing was steady, and he seemed to be the one calm presence in the sea of grief. But then, without warning, Max's head lifted, his ears perked sharply, his eyes locked on the coffin, unblinking and alert. His entire body tensed, as if sensing something the humans could not. Suddenly, he lunged forward, barking loud enough that his voice echoed off the high stone walls. The sudden noise caused people to gasp and look around in confusion. Some shifted uneasily, unsure whether to be afraid or concerned. The atmosphere turned tense, as if the dog's behavior was opening a door no one wanted to see behind. People began to murmur, their whispers growing louder, wondering why a dog would be so agitated in the middle of a funeral. The priest, Father Thomas, tried to reassure everyone that grief affected animals in strange ways, but even he looked uncomfortable, wiping sweat from his brow as Max's barking grew faster and more desperate. Max began to scratch at the base of the coffin, his claws clicking against the polished wood. It was not the behavior of a pet mourning its master. It was the behavior of an animal determined to expose something hidden. At the back of the church stood Daniel Carter, a private investigator no one in Willow Creek really knew. Only a few weeks earlier, Charles had secretly hired Daniel to look into matters he never explained fully. Daniel had arrived quietly and spent his days studying the village's records, asking careful questions that most people brushed off. Now, Daniel stepped forward, his rain-soaked coat trailing behind him. His eyes were focused and calm, but there was a tension in his jaw that betrayed how serious this moment had become. While many in the room believed the dog was simply overwhelmed by grief, Daniel knew better. Charles had hinted that if anything ever happened to him, Max would be the one to reveal the truth. Without waiting for permission, Daniel moved down the aisle. He didn't look at the priest or the shocked faces of the villagers. His attention was fixed entirely on Max, who was now letting out a low, anxious growl and tapping a paw against the small panel on the coffin's side. Daniel crouched beside the dog and placed one hand against the smooth wood. He felt carefully along the seam, searching for anything out of place. As the murmurs grew louder and the tension built, he found a thin gap running along the bottom edge. Slowly, he pulled the panel free. Inside was a hidden compartment that no one had known existed. The air in the church seemed to freeze as Daniel reached inside and pulled out several bundles of cash wrapped tightly with rubber bands. Alongside the money lay glittering jewelry. rings, bracelets, and watches that looked expensive enough to belong in a vault. But that was not the end of it. Tucked deep in the corner was a small velvet pouch. Daniel opened it and found a silver flash drive, cold and heavy in his palm. He held it up so that everyone could see. The room was so silent that the rain outside sounded louder than ever. Daniel realized that Charles must have hidden this evidence for a reason. He had suspected that someone close to him was stealing money meant for the church and the community. Charles had planned to expose everything, but he never got the chance. At the front of the room, Father Thomas's face had turned pale. His eyes darted from the cash to the jewelry and finally to the flash drive. His hands trembled as he gripped the pulpit, as if trying to steady himself. It was clear to everyone watching that the priest had been keeping secrets he never intended to share. Daniel stood tall, the evidence heavy in his hand. The truth was no longer something that could be hidden beneath a polished coffin. Slowly, the realization spread through the crowd. This was not a simple death. This was a crime that had touched every person in Willow Creek. As the police were called and Father Thomas was quietly taken into custody, people began to weep, not just for the loss of Charles, but for the betrayal of someone they had trusted for years. Neighbors embraced each other. Some hung their heads in shame, wondering how they had never seen the truth. In the days that followed, the village was transformed. Investigations uncovered hidden bank accounts and secret transactions. More names were revealed, people who had helped cover up the thefts or turned a blind eye. Some were arrested, others fled town, unable to face the shame. Through it all, Emma kept Max close by her side. She often said that without him, the truth might have stayed buried forever. And Daniel remained in Willow Creek for several more weeks, determined to help Emma piece together every detail of what her uncle had discovered. Some nights, as the rain returned and the streets grew quiet, Emma would sit beside Max and feel grateful that her uncle's loyal dog had refused to let the past stay hidden. Because sometimes the bravest detective in the world doesn't wear a badge or carry a gun. Sometimes he has 4 legs, a strong heart, and the courage to tell the truth no matter how dark it might be.